demographics and also the business environment in the Madison Heights, that will be helpful, please.
Right. So you know how Madison Heights, it's a suburb of north of Detroit, Michigan. And as you know, a lot of American cities, they developed by sprawling away from the urban center. So instead of building more housing in the city, Detroit spread geographically. And so Madison Heights, my hometown, is one of those cities. We're 2 miles north of the border of Detroit. And it's just a short drive to downtown Detroit to get to the world headquarters of, General Motors. The Ford Motor Company world headquarters is in another suburb, and Chrysler Automotive is just a couple miles north of us. So this area is really dominated by the auto industry. So my father was an engineer with General Motors for 40 years. All my friends and family has some connection to the auto industry, whether they're in sales at a dealership or they're in design and engineering, or maybe they work at a mechanic. We are the motor city, and we just live and breathe cars. And it really has dictated development. So our region doesn't have mass transportation. We don't have a subway system because we want everyone to buy a car, right?
That's true.
And so Madison Heights is one of those suburbs outside of Detroit City, and it's a working class city. So a lot of the residents are factory workers. They're the men and women that build the Ford trucks and cars, and General Motors vehicles. And so it's a hardworking, honest city, and it's a fun city. No one's getting rich as a factory worker, but we have this great cultural spirit. We have a lot of community events, and the families stay in this area. So it's just a great place to live and raise a family.
It's good to hear about the Madison Heights. And recently, I think a few months back, Madison Heights has been in the news, and also looks like some attention in the national level too, about the leak on the chemical leak on the 696 from a factory called Electroplating Services. So can you help us out in understanding a little more about what exactly happened there, and what's happening right now, and what remedies as a government took on that particular issue, please?
Yes, of course. That has been such an important issue. So even though all across the world we've been dealing with stopping the spread of the coronavirus, as a government, we still have to protect from other dangers. And one of those dangers was this major chemical leak onto the freeway. And it was at the end of December 2019. All of the chemicals that this company were dumping into the ground, they got into the groundwater and froze, and that frozen chemical water burst into the freeway. And so for the first time, we saw what was underground. And so it was a chemical chrome plating facility. So in a lot of vehicles, you have the shiny chrome parts. Well, that's a highly toxic procedure to get that beautiful shiny auto part. And so this was a small factory, and it was a company that was owned by this one family for generations. And the current owner just had a difficult time maintaining his business. So he cut corners. And when he did that, so instead of paying to properly dispose of chrome waste, he would dump those chemicals into the dirt floor of his basement. And so this was years of dumping chemicals into the ground. And so eventually, all of that contaminated soil and sand and clay built up to the point that it literally just bubbled over when it started freezing. And so the state government immediately came in, because the city is too small to handle something this big. And it's been 6 months since we first noticed this. The state has been pumping contaminated water from this ground every day for the last 6 months. and
Wow.
the groundwater continues to come up with toxins in it. And so the fear was that as these toxins are now oozing, spurting into the street, that we're afraid that they're going to get into the sewer system, and the sewer is connected to the river, to the lake. And so those chemicals will go from the ground into the river and then back into our drinking water. And so
Yeah.
we have to do all we can to suck that. Well, first of all, to stop the spread of those chemicals. And then now we got to go into the ground and start digging up the dirt that was left behind, because you can't. We don't want anyone touching that dirt anymore. So there's layer upon layer of problems, and the next steps are going to be expensive and time consuming.
Oh, okay. So is it completely done, or it's kind of, are we still in the process of fixing the problem right now?
Yeah, we're still in the emergency phase of just sucking up the contaminated water. Once the water, it's just groundwater, the water that is just naturally in the ground.
Okay.
It's not like it's a running river. Once we finish sucking contaminated groundwater, that's when we'll go to the next phase of doing a full environmental remediation of the site. And effectively, we're going to dig as deep as we can and remove every grain of contaminated soil. And then you got to properly dispose of it. Let me go back a step. So first we have to continue to remove all the contaminated water. But then before we can remove the soil, we have to demolish the buildings.
Mm.
So the owner was challenging us on the demolition. And so the city government had to go to court and get a court order to allow the city to demolish the building so we could go clean up the dirt. And we had to demonstrate to the court that the building was dangerous in itself. And the building was in complete disrepair. It was a death trap. Windows were blown out. So many tipped over barrels of chemical had compromised the structural steel of the building. And actually, our fire department said if this building ever lit on fire, we would not be able to put out the fire. We don't have the tools, and we'd have to evacuate 500,000 people downwind from a chemical fire. So the next step is the building has to go, and then once the building is gone, then we can clean up the soil. But we're a small city, and we're worried about the millions of US dollars this would cost. It would bankrupt a small city. So we need the state government or the federal government to find the money to clean this up the right way.
Oh, okay. So are you getting enough support from the state and federal to clean up this particular mess, whatever you have in the Madison Heights right now?
Yeah, but it really comes down to relationships. So one of the most important parts of me being in public office is cooperating with the governor's office, county leadership, federal leadership. And because of those friendships, they had an open door policy to me, and they listened to what the city needs. And so the state has been our most active partner. The state of Michigan has spent a lot of money on the cleanup, and before coronavirus, the state promised to pay for the full cleanup and demolition. Coronavirus policy has kind of changed the spending priority of the state. But if and when we get past coronavirus, maybe there'll be a second wave, we don't know. We trust that the state will back us up. So the timeline is uncertain, but we have state partnership. The federal government is a little too slow, and the federal government was honest with us, saying that they have 10,000 other sites to get to before they get to ours, right? There's a lot of industrial pollution in America, and we just have to get in line.
Gotcha. Hopefully, I mean, this thing will taken care under the leadership of the city, Madison Heights, and the state leadership, and hopefully it will be clean and done safe for everybody. Let's hope for that. And coming back to the Madison Heights, I mean, I live in Troy. I mean, in Troy we have east and west Troy. Not very big difference. But there we call it the east side of the properties and the west side of the properties when you talk about real estate. But something similar to that. In Madison Heights, I've been hearing about. South and north in Madison Heights. So, what is that divide of south and north in Madison Heights? Can you help us out in understanding? I've been in Troy area for more than, I would say, 12 years and 20 years in Michigan. I've never, only after researching about you, then I heard about South and North in Madison Heights. I've not heard of the South-North differentiation in the Madison Heights before. So help us out in understanding what is the difference and what's happening there, please.
The city is so small that it's kind of funny to think that there's different sides. I think a lot of it is just there's two public high schools, so there's some rivalry. The two high schools want to compete against each other, so that kind of the energy of two high schools competing against each other bleeds into other conversations. But actually, it's really a historical conversation for our whole region. Okay. And so as the Detroit area was developing, you really look mile by mile outside of the center of Detroit. And so a city like Madison Heights was founded in, the 1950s. And so, think about going back to 1950s, the city of Troy, where you live, that was probably mostly farmland. Okay. In 1950s, Madison Heights was similar. There were pig farms and horse ranches. And so when people were starting to develop the suburbs in the 1950s, those homes were built around like 10 Mile. And then like a decade later in the 60s, they just went 1 mile north to like 12 Mile. And then, in the 70s, they went up to 13 Mile. And, they just kept going through the region. And so think about the people who built houses in the 1950s. If they were 20 years old in the 50s, how old would they be now, right? They could be, right? And so those founding fathers and mothers of Madison Heights in the 1950s it's a lot of widows and widowers. It's a lot of 90-year-old women who are only surviving on a Social Security check, maybe $1,000 a month. And so those people, a lot of those 90 are elders. They're still living alone, and they're living in extreme poverty. And so that really impacts neighborhood by neighborhood on a mile per every mile going north in the city, where you get to the north part of Madison Heights, 14 Mile, the border with Troy. Those are the biggest homes in the city because, by the 1970s and 80s, just the building culture in America were bigger houses, bigger backyards, right? And then you get into Troy, right? And houses built in the 90s and the 2000s, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And so really, it's a history lesson. And, my new job as judge is in Hazel Park. Hazel Park is a little bit older than Madison Heights. So those houses are smaller. And so, as our elders are dying or moving, who's buying those new houses, right? So, if you're a new doctor, you just got your license as a physician, and you want to live in Southeast Oakland County, and you have a young family, do you want to start your family in one of those small 800 square foot houses in Hazel Park? Or do you want to pick the 4,000 square foot mansion in Troy, right? Some of those things, the idea of space and where you want to raise your family have changed over the last 60 years. And so what happens is a lot of professionals will move further away from Detroit just because they can afford bigger houses, where in Madison Heights, Hazel Park, Ferndale, you get more of the working class families, maybe the nurses and the teachers versus the doctors and the lawyers.
Gotcha. So I see the difference, in the way the people have been living there, and then it's been like over a period of time. That it is the same thing any other place, even Detroit downtown also, you see the old houses and the new houses or new buildings, those kind of things. That's the kind of thing. Hopefully. So how is it impacting the governance on the Madison Heights? Madison Heights. I see some decisions would be challenging in those So if it is just like a country level, I mean, you see the similar issues at the country level, at the state level, those kind of things. Like, I mean, you need to support the people who need some help, and people who are contributing to the system. So it's always a balance between these two. I mean, you need some people need help, and some people can contribute, and they can come back and complain that my money is going in the wrong way. So I'm sure you might have, I mean, at your level, at Madison Heights level, I'm sure you might have got these kind of situations. And how do you guys resolve those conflicts?
It's a challenge, and we have to know our role as a government. You know, in America, like government doesn't do everything that it does in other countries. My wife was born in Taiwan. She's Taiwanese, and the government does a lot of things differently and better in some respects, right? Maybe a better education system, better healthcare
No
system.
doubt about it. Yes.
There's more of a social security net in Taiwan than there is in America. So America relies on a lot of charities and faith-based groups. And during coronavirus, when people in Madison Heights started losing their job, there was a great demand for food. People panicked. Like, I was just laid off. I don't know when I'm going to get unemployment checks. And so Madison Heights is not the government or the entity that is going to feed the people. But what we did is we provided our city buildings that we weren't using because we shut down. We provided free rent to private charities to house their food packaging and food delivery systems. So, local government in Michigan is strictly created for public safety. We are here to protect the safety and the well-being of our residents. So police and fire are primary, and then everything else has to be somehow connected to protecting your health. And so we stretch that argument sometimes, like, well, why do we have a library? Well, we say, well, education of a library is important to protect your health because you need access to materials. And so it's difficult. So we know, because we study census tracts, we study poverty reports, and so we know people are struggling. And so we can alleviate like financial burdens of people living in poverty by waiving a portion of their tax bill, or by allowing them to make tax payments or water bill payments over a course of time. One of the things we do is anyone that's a senior can automatically get a tax reduction, because we tend to realize that they're going to be lower income in our community, especially those I mentioned earlier, living on $1,000 a month Social Security check. And so there's some things where we alleviate the financial burden. Of course, they have to demonstrate a true hardship, but we're prepared and we're aware of people living in poverty. But I mean, we equally apply our services no matter if they're rich or poor, or educated or uneducated.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing about in the news that, I mean, some cities are providing they're not shutting off their water. I mean, even though they don't pay the bills, those kind of things I've been hearing. That's a challenge for the city. They need to provide the services, and at the same time, they need to manage their own budgets. I mean, that's where, I mean, we have most of the cities are struggling to get some funding from the federal. That's a different topic, probably. I don't know if you want to touch that, or you want to, how is the funding for financial situation of the Madison Heights, I mean, compared to the other, in general, about the Madison Heights financial situation, I mean, taxes and the revenue.
The financial system for cities is completely broken, and that was proven during the Great Recession a decade ago. So governments, local governments, cities, townships, villages, get most of their funding through property taxes. And so when property taxes were cut in half 10 years ago, that meant we immediately had to cut half of our budget, right? We have limited savings. And so we've had to rely on like other sources of revenue. And we've tried to press the state government to share more of their budget with cities. and that has slightly improved year to year. But with federal government, you could ask every mayor or township supervisor in Michigan. We all support the HEROES Act and the CARES Act that would bring more money to local government. But it's a challenge. I mean, so when people started getting laid off a couple months ago for coronavirus reasons, we had to, we were compassionate. We realized, okay, if people don't have work, they don't have income, maybe they can't do things like lawn maintenance. So maybe we should not ticket someone $100 for not cutting their grass every week. So, excuse me. So the city lost a source of revenue through fines and tickets, but it was the obvious, compassionate, smart thing to do for our people. Eventually we're going to have to start maintaining our neighborhoods, because we don't want rats coming in if it's knee-high grass. And so that's going to be something the city has to balance now is, okay, when do we go back to doing full-time code enforcement? This is very challenging. The money side of running government is a constant pressure and concern of ours because we're not like a business that can just go bankrupt. I mean, we have to provide policing services no matter what. And so during the recession, we basically had to cut everything. That wasn't police and fire.
Gotcha. Okay. About I heard one good point about you like collaborating with the neighboring cities in getting help from your 911 and the police, and also you promised or you kind of thinking of hiring more police people or 911 supporters. Who can work in 911. So where are you on that? Are you able to achieve those goals? With this funding, with right now the financial crisis, are you able to do that, or what do you think about those things?
So it's a difficult conversation. So last year, the voters of Madison Heights approved an increase to the millage to allow hiring more police officers and firefighters and a 911 operator, and to spend more money on development to bring in some new businesses to our city. Because of the crisis, we've realized we need to not fully raise those taxes. And so the city actually decided, we're only going to the voters gave us permission to raise the taxes, but we're only going to raise about 25% of what the voters would have allowed. So that 75% tax increase will go back to the property owners of Madison Heights. But with that 25% increase, we're only charging 25% of the planned increase. That'll go to hiring police officers and 911 operators, and we've already done that. Now, 911 operators, that's like 6 to 8 months of training, so it's very difficult training. So it's going to take some time to get them on board. But yeah, so public safety will be prioritized for hiring, and that has taken place.
Gotcha. Very nice. Thank you very much for the information. So how is the whole pandemic is affecting the Madisonite citizens and the government of the Madisonite? How is it and the whole environment in Madisonites during this pandemic time?
Yeah, so we have, of all people in Madisonites, there's about 30,000 residents, and just over 30 people have passed away from complications with coronavirus, and that that's impacted every neighborhood in the city.